I want to tell you one more thing I know about the Negro. When I go through Las Vegas, North Las Vegas, and I would see these little government houses, and in front of that government house, the door was usually open, and the older people and the kids, and there's always at least a half a dozen people sitting on the porch. They didn't have nothing to do. They didn't have nothing for their kids to do. They didn't have nothing for their young girls to do. And because they were basically on government subsidy, and so now what do? They abort their young children. They put their young men in jail because they never learned how to pick cotton. And I've often wondered, are they better off as slaves picking cotton, having family life and doing things, or are they better off under government subsidy?
This confrontation, which didn't involve any bullets being fired, certainly involved rifles being pointed at the federal government. One of the wildlife trucks was rammed by an ATV. One of Bundy's sons was tased, and it started to get pretty heated. There were some people on the side of Bundy that were arguing that women and children should be put up front, so if there was some kind of event that it would look like the federal government was shooting women and children. But needless to say, the Bureau of Land Management de-escalated all of this by just kind of walking away from the situation, saying that it was too hot, it was too heavy, something bad was going to happen, and they would get the cattle some other way. After this occurred, Clive Bundy ordered the sheriff to de-arm all federal officials and bureaucrats in Nevada, and of course they didn't do that. That made him very mad. But that's kind of where that situation stands right now. Bundy has never really been punished for his $1 million fine or for refusing, to follow court orders or any of that jazz. But now we're in Oregon, and how did that happen? Well, Dwight and Stephen Hammond. These were two guys that set fire to some of these lands that they claimed they owned, were state lands that the federal government didn't own, and they were convicted. They were convicted of arson, and they were sent to prison where they had to show up the other day. And that's when members of the Bundy family and the Hammond family, along with about 150 armed militiamen, took over this facility in eastern Oregon as a stand, as saying basically that this building isn't owned by the federal government, it's owned by the people, and they're basically showing force to say that we're not going to take it anymore.
An Oregon militia organizer is very upset that some of his haters are sending him hate mail and hate objects to protest what they're doing. So I'm not going to give too much away. Let's hear from John Ritzheimer about what he's been getting in the mail and how upset he is about it.
What's going on, everybody? So we went and picked up some mail that came in from, a lot of the supporters, but along with that mail, we got an abundance of the hate mail. And it was really mind-blowing to me that people would actually spend their money. This box right here, $17.90. They spend and waste their money on all this hateful stuff to send out here to us and buy this ridiculous stuff. It's really ridiculous. Even this one was really funny, a bag of dicks. So rather than going out and doing good, they just spend all their money on hate and hate and hate and hate. So we're gonna create a table, and we're gonna continue to do work and do good for our country. We're not going to be deterred. We're not going to let all your junk and hate mail sidetrack us, and we're going to continue to do what's right for our country. For the rest of you patriots out there that are still twiddling your thumbs, debating whether or not you should come out, well, now's the time. If you want to be part of history in the making, you need to get out here and you need to show some support. And I'm not talking about coming out here and being an outside perimeter. Come here and be a patriot. Come here and stand up for your country. Do what's right. Enough talk. Now it's time for action. I hope to see you.
I couldn't love that any more than I already do.
Oh, he doesn't like the bag of dicks.
Or does he? When he picked it up, he's like, oh, look, a bag of dicks. So there's so many things to say. Number one, how are these guys getting mail? who takes over a building with guns, a federal building,
Yep.
and then the government, who they're protesting, delivers them mail anyway.
So let's get into that then, Daryl. And let me just set it up by saying this. Like, look, I became proactively doing anti-fascist activity, I guess is the way to describe it. Going out and confronting and organizing counter demos and working with other people. Probably really when alt-right hit the street. When they left the Gamergate chat and hit the street, that's when I first started getting involved. But I do understand that fascism it could be from day to day, but really it's kind of like year to year. It just becomes a completely different thing, has to repackage itself to react to the contemporary social conditions. And it's a constant effort of co-opting and appropriating whatever is the predominant culture at the moment and trying to twist it in such a way that's useful to bolstering fascism. Now, look, we're not hearing so much about, there's still Proud Boys, don't get it wrong, but we're not hearing about them as much. We're not hearing about Identity Europa as much, probably thanks to Unicorn Riot, right? And their leaks and stuff and various other pieces that have come out. But Boogaloos has kind of come to the fore, I would say, especially during all this recent uprising stuff and the response to George Floyd. And so I guess my question is, what is causing you the most concern? Which groups what are you looking at the most, I guess, in terms of the most immediate fascist threat?
Well, I'm gonna keep it on the Proud Boys there.
Okay.
Keep it on the Proud Boys there. I think the Boogaloo crowd, that's gonna phase out pretty quickly, only because they already started killing people and they're killing cops. So
Right.
So that's going to be a problem that is going to take care of itself. But that doesn't mean we can't accelerate the shit. So if you see him around, like I know one knucklehead. When I started dealing with that Boogaloo crowd, it was only during the Branch Covidian rallies, the reopen rallies, that I started just jumping into it. Particularly because there's a dude named Paul Miller who is just right up the road from where I'm at, who does regular Instagram things under the name Gypsy Crusader. If you go on Instagram and you look up Gypsy Crusader, you'll see him all over the place. He has various accounts. And he gave me an idea of exactly what the Boogaloo was. He said in one of his videos it was the second Civil War that will happen when the right feels it cannot win national elections anymore. Now this dude, now I know the Boogaloos like to say they're pretty libertarian. You have they're not racist or anything. They always say that.
Right.
And they say they probably are best friends. We're on the same team and all this BS. Paul Miller is straight up Nazi. If you look at some of his stuff now, he is pure Nazi. I mean, it's pure fash, everything. I mean, because he has a Telegram channel called the Crusader News Network. He fancies himself a Crusader. He's very anti-Muslim, and you see Hitler on it all the time. His Instagram page is loaded with Patriot Front stuff. He's always hyping up Patriot Front. This guy's been doxxed as of last year because he was part, by the way, of that Proud Boy fight that happened back in November 2018 in New York City.
Oh, okay. The one in the Upper East Side, outside the Gavin McGinnis thing. Gavin pulled out that sword and shit.
Yeah, he didn't get in trouble. I mean, Paul Miller was there. He was swinging, but he never got caught. He never got busted. He went on TV talking about how he was there, but nothing really happened to him. Now we see him part of that silly ass Boogaloo crowd. But the thing is about him, he got doxxed because aside from that, because he was over there calling for people to assassinate Ilhan Omar. He's cheering on the Nazi who killed a bunch of people at the mosque in New Zealand. You know, I mean,
wow.
He's trying to dox Bill Gates to see if somebody can set his house on fire with him inside. All of this is on Instagram, by the way. So here we go again with something owned by Facebook that they can't seem to get rid of.
Well, I'll tell you, I think maybe the reason the Boogaloo thing is so on my personal radar is, I'm in Nevada, and I'm in the state of Cliven, Bundy, and the Bundy Ranch folks, the same folks who then later went up and took over the bird sanctuary and got the boxes of dildos in the mail and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah, those were good times.
Here's where the irony really gets thick, is that you are writing off a whole class of people, African Americans, as sort of dangerously dependent because they get government assistance. At the same time, you're grazing your cows on public land for free. So how are you not sort of a welfare queen in a cowboy hat?
Well, I might be a welfare queen, but I'll tell you, I'm producing something for America and using a resource that nobody else can use, would use or could use, and I'm putting red meat on your table, and maybe I'm not doing enough, but I'm trying.
Hey, I love a burger. I love a good filet, but there are 16,000 other ranchers in Nevada who pay grazing fees. Aren't you mooching off of them?
Well, I'll tell you, there's 16,000 people not very happy, and there's 16,000 people have signed contracts with the United States government. They should be thinking about sovereignty of the state of Nevada and signing contracts with their county government, not the United States. I can tell them that much.
But this land has been federal since we got it from Mexico in 1848. The grazing laws have been on the books since 1934. I know your family's been there a long time, but you own a little bit and we own the rest. And it doesn't seem reasonable.
Well, you better start respecting my rights a little bit, and let's start respecting state sovereignty a little bit. And then you show me in the Constitution where the United States could possibly own this land that I graze my cattle on. Just take 5 minutes and show me.
We really have to backtrack ourselves to the 19th century to try to explain any of this. And we all know, of course, that most of those western lands, and specifically Nevada, was garnered by the United States from the Mexican War when it was ceded to us. And then Nevada became a state, of course, in 1864. But what most people don't know is Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution, which gives Congress the ability to kind of set conditions for statehood. And there was a bunch of laws passed for these western states, and they were called enabling acts, which basically gave the federal government ownership over uninhibited, unused land in these western states, so it could be utilized for the best interest of the whole United States. And Nevada signed off on this, and that's kind of the way that it is. Over 80% of the land in Nevada is technically owned by the federal government. But of course, there are many ranchers who use this federal land, and one of them is the name Cliven Bundy. There he is right there. Now, Cliven is a member of the Sovereign Citizens Movement, and personally, as an individual, he rejects the authority and the legality of the United States government. To these sovereign citizens, to Mr. Bundy, the most powerful person in the world is the local sheriff. But this really all began in 1989 when the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service designated the western tortoise, the turtle, as an endangered species. And they used this new classification to basically create some regulations to preserve some of that land in Nevada. And some of these regulations dealt with the grazing of cattle on federal land, as well as the use of off-road vehicles to try to make this land usable for generations to come. So Cliven Bundy used much of that federal land near his ranch. His family has owned the ranch for more than 100 years. He's a Mormon. They've settled that land back in the 1800s. And he basically refused to pay any more or to reduce the amount of cattle that were grazing on these lands, claiming that the federal government had no right to do that they didn't own the land, that the state owned the land. So he refused to pay the fines that started to rack up. And in 1993, his license was revoked. He wasn't supposed to have any cattle on that land. But, of course, he didn't pay the fine, and he didn't remove the cattle. And this has been going on now for 20 years, and it's gotten violent at some times. Some members of the Sovereign Citizens Movement sent pipe bombs to the U.S. Forest Service in Carson City in the mid-1990s. So it's gotten pretty serious. And there's been a couple court cases, Bundy versus United States, where Bundy has gone to the federal courts saying that they had no right to do this, that, in fact, it was the state of Nevada that owned this land, and he shouldn't have to pay these fines, which have now accumulated to over $1 million. And, of course, he lost both of those court cases. and he still refused to pay. In August of 2013, there was a letter sent to him giving him 45 days with the threat of the cattle being removed by the Bureau of Land Management. Of course, he ignored that, and then this all came to a head in April of 2014, where the Bureau of Land Management showed up at the ranch to try to remove the cattle. And this is where Bundy put out a call to his followers, to militiamen from across the western United States, to gather at his ranch to fight what he saw as this unjust taking of his private property. And this confrontation, which didn't involve any bullets being fired, certainly involved rifles being pointed at the federal government. One of the wildlife trucks was rammed by an ATV. One of Bundy's sons was tased, and it started to get pretty heated. There were some people on the side of Bundy that were arguing that women and children should be put up front, so if there was some kind of event, that it would look like the federal government was shooting women and children. But needless to say, the Bureau of Land Management de-escalated all of this by just kind of walking away from the situation, saying that it was too hot, it was too heavy, something bad was going to happen, and they would get the cattle some other way. After this occurred, Clive Bundy ordered the sheriff to de-arm all federal officials and bureaucrats in Nevada, and of course they didn't do that. That made him very mad. But that's kind of where that situation stands right now. Bundy has never really been punished for his $1 million fine or for refusing, to follow court orders of any of that jazz. But now we're in Oregon, and how did that happen? Well, Dwight and Stephen Hammond, these were two guys that set fire to some of these lands that they claimed that they owned, were state lands that the federal government didn't own, and they were convicted. They were convicted of arson, and they were sent to prison, where they had to show up the other day. And that's when members of the Bundy family and the Hammond family, along with about 150 armed militiamen, took over this facility in eastern Oregon as a stand, as saying basically that this building isn't owned by the federal government, it's owned by the people, and they're basically showing force to say that we're not going to take it anymore. So that's basically the situation. You have the cattle grazing thing going on in Nevada, you have the arsons, now you have this Oregon facility being taken over by the militia.
But, these are the people that took up arms to basically steal Bureau of Land Management land, public lands to graze cattle on, that has been in their family for generations, Beryl, right? Mm-hmm. And these people terrify me a little bit, okay? And these are the people that, for Reno has a very sort of sophomore civil rights community. It doesn't have a long history of being a strong leftist foundation. We had a pretty solid Occupy here. We've had IWW here, but we haven't had any of the other communist parties here. It's just a small population, but a lot of the people, they're really coming out in support of this movement since the murder of George Floyd, but they're not recognizing so much that the militia here listen, Cliven Bundy is coming out saying that he believes George Floyd was murdered, and Cliven said Black Lives Matter.
Was that Cliven or Ammon Bundy?
It might have been Ammon.
Ammon was the one that everybody's mad at right now because he's on that side.
Owned me because I simply was going to go to a rally with the Black Lives Matter in support of defunding the police, because yes, the police need to be defunded. And anybody who don't understand that is just somehow must be, I'm trying not to be, too poignant here, but must have a problem.
My man hates federal agents. My man hates the federal government. So yeah, he's gonna, I'm actually surprised that he's the only one that I've seen so far.
Well, and so I can tell you, and then I promise I want to hear your thoughts. But
no
which is, and there's a video on our channel for the Reno BLM march. If people want to take a look at it. But there was a militia guy that came out, and of course he has the proud infidel patch on his thing, right? And he gets confronted by me and a couple other black bloc cats, and he's really happy to say Black Lives Matter. But then, of course, we push him and say, well, say trans lives matter. Say Muslim lives matter. And he wouldn't do it.
Why are you here? Do you believe the cops murdered George Floyd?
I know they did. I watched the video.
Okay. So what are you here for?
Whatever.
So why are you here? See, I'm here to stand up for justice for George Floyd and to say that Black Lives Matter. I'm curious why you're here.
I'm here. That's what the police did.
Oh, is that it? Black Lives Matter now?
So you're an anti-government militia is what you are. Are you a sovereign citizen?
No.
No, okay.
No. Anyways, kid,
Yeah, that's kind of how that works, fascist.
Get the fuck out. Go. You're not welcome. Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter.
right. They do, but this isn't about what you have to say right now.
Yeah, white dudes had enough to say, homie. Nobody wants to hear your white boy shit.
That's the problem. You're white and not saying anything.
Can't even say the words Black Lives Matter at a Black Lives Matter march.
So why are you here defending them?
I'm not defending you.
I just heard you say that you fucking hate Muslims.
Yeah, you said all Muslims are violent and shit, right?
Say it right now. Say Black Lives Matter.
Say Muslim lives matter.
Black Lives Matter.
Say Muslim lives matter.
That's all you need to say.
Say Muslim lives matter.
Everybody's lives matter.
Nah, say Muslim lives matter. None of that Nazi-ass all lives matter racist
lives
bullshit,
matter.
Holmes.
Period.
No, Black Lives Matter is taking away from the issue. Black Lives Matter.
Black lives.
Black Lives Matter.
To our capitalist imperialist bosses, Black lives don't matter. We're trying to equalize that so that they do matter. You're not fighting for that.
All lives can't matter until
You're here to make a mockery of it, Chud. Fuck 3%ers, man. Fuck the militia. And fuck you, bigot.
You're not fucking welcome.
But he was framing himself like, no, I am here in solidarity with George Floyd. I'm on your side. I'm on your team. And I'm going, this is Bundy Ranch people. And so maybe I'm a little more hyper attuned to the militia right now because of being Nevada and because of recent experiences. But I appreciate you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that the militia groups need a talking to. Yeah, I mean, I've been dealing with militias ever since Linda Thompson's nonsense back in '94, and I saw them right away as being a kind of legitimate Klan, kind of legitimate neo-Nazi group. I mean, with black members and everything, that kind of thing. And that's one of the things that really annoys me about the right. Whenever they see one thing that used to work in the mainstream not working, they just basically position themselves so that they can still do the things that they want to do without getting into too much trouble. And that's what the militia groups are. All they have to say is, I'm not racist, and they can still do all the things they did when they were the Klan. All right? So it's like that dude that you saw. I mean, it's not to say that you have some people that are conflicted, I should say. I mean, but my attitude about that is talk to them, but recognize it's what Theodore Roosevelt said: speak softly, but carry a big stick. Because that stick might be needed.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that everybody likes to talk about, especially a lot of folks in the mainstream, love to talk about how I help people get out of the white power scene and all that. And but if you listen to the right, you'll hear some of them go, "Well, Daryl Davis is better at it and all that." And it's like, Daryl Davis has a way of doing things that I generally cannot do. And Daryl Davis will go and talk to the Klan and count them among his friends and such, and then they seem to understand that their way is not the right way, and then they get out. Okay. My attitude is, yeah, I'm willing to talk to you. Yeah, I'm willing to have an open door policy, but if you're still Klan, I still got a boot for your ass.
Word.
I mean, it's got to be real like that.
Yeah.
Because as I always tell people, my obligation is going to be to the people that you will hurt, or you have hurt. My obligation is to them. So yeah, you could talk to those folks. You can help them. You can have some sort of association with them, but you got to still recognize them for who they are. They still might be trying to hurt you even while they're talking to you.
That's right.
So, and that's where the problems come in. They got to prove themselves. Once they start getting involved in that BS and start trying to appeal to us in some way, they got to prove that they're not going to be what we have seen them be for generations upon generations. I mean, and when it comes to libertarians, I always, one of the things that I've been telling people, especially after watching Hamilton, is that, and I tell them this. They say, hey, look, I consider you guys to be the next to be the generation, to be the parallel to the founding fathers. That is not a compliment.
Right.
Because the founding fathers co-opted what those farmers in the fields and what Tom Paine written, what they had in mind. They couldn't understand why their money was going to a king 3,000 miles away. And don't worry, I'm cognizant about the fact that we're talking about colonialists here. I understand that. But the truth of the matter, but beyond that, the reason why they wanted revolution is because they wanted to be autonomous. They wanted to be independent. They wanted to build their own. Along comes the so-called founding fathers and the land, which were basically landowners, and i.e. the rich, who says, "Hey, this is our opportunity to take everything."
Right.
So they become the leaders of the revolution, and when they win that revolution, what happens? All those farmers weren't allowed to vote. You had to own land in order to have any say in what direction this country went into. That's what libertarians are. Of today's libertarians.
Right.
We have to, those who are involved in the anti-fascist scene, those who are involved in any kind of anti-fascist work, have to recognize libertarians are not our friends if they if they have those intentions for us. They are not here to try to do anything positive for us as a people, just for themselves. That's all I gotta say on that.
No, I so appreciate it because like, look, it's like the militia movement and the libertarian movement has traditionally been very closely related to like the sovereign citizens, people that would shooting cops in the face and stuff, and then what happens is, Ferguson, right? And this term Black Lives Matter pops up in the lexicon, and these guys go, "Nuh-uh, cops. We care about the people that are murdering the black lives that you're standing up," which was just fundamentally 110 billion% a racist manifestation, a reactionary manifestation to Black Lives Matter. But it was fascinating because these same people who have spent their lives hating cops are now embracing the no, blue line, we love cops. And some of them I think are kind of like, they're getting over that weird contradiction that they embraced for a while, and they're kind of going back to the we hate cops too thing. Does that make sense to you or no?
I don't know if they're when you take a look at the Branch Commodian rallies just before everything happened with George Floyd. I mean, it's amazing how much of a difference you would see. I mean, so in real time. This year was a yin and a yang that you can actually watch. You saw them out there with their guns, with just straight up strapped up, going to state houses talking about they want to behead the governor.
Right.
And all the cops out there saw these massive amounts of people and just stared them down.
Right.
And nothing happened. They all were able to go home with
no tear gas, no rubber bullets.
No tear gas, nothing like that. Enter us. No weapons. No intentions of hurting anyone. The cops start attacking with the tear gas, with the pepper spray, with the rubber bullets and everything, and it's on. It's on. I got to tell you, though, I got to be real about it. When they sit there and talk about, because it's amazing to me how people would call Black Lives Matter cowards. It says, no, we fought the cops without your guns.
Word.
And the attitude that I have is that libertarians, especially after Portland, everybody's starting to sing this after Portland. You always talked about government tyranny.
Right.
Always talked about the government coming in and trying to overrun the states, not recognizing the states' rights as we are trying to assert ourselves. You were supposed to be about free speech, and here you have as an army coming in Lafayette Park in D.C. and later on in Portland, trying to take that free speech away. Now you have excuses for not being out there. And my attitude about that is, that's okay. We knew who you were already.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't need you.
So they built silos. and stocked them with like years and years worth of food and ammunition in preparation for when unmarked federal officers gaffle people up off the street. And then when it happens, they're like, cool.
Yeah, that's the attitude. And what makes it even worse is that you see when they are out there, this is the important thing to remember. When they are out there, you see the camaraderie between them and the cops. Cops giving them the okay sign, cops shaking their hand, cops with 3%er tattoos, as it was the case in North Carolina.
Jesus.
It's not surprising. I mean, I remember writing on Twitter. Never in my 30 years of doing this have I ever seen a right-wing rally being attacked by the cops.
Not once.
And I wrote that because that day there was a vigil being held for the woman in Seattle that was ran over by some scumbag.
Right.
It was a vigil. And for some reason, the cops felt the need to attack it.